Get started, so please let's settle down. Try to find a place. If anybody's got an empty seat next to them, raise their hand so that folks in the back could come and sit down. So you guys in the back, look for the people's hands up, and there's empty seats next to them. Don't be shy. Unless you want to stand up, that's fine. It's going to be here for a long time. Okay. Welcome to our Board of Supervisors, it says regular meeting. It is? Okay. Regular meeting, February 16, 2016. Could you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. McManus, you want to lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, we have on our agenda, we have public comments. And we're going to limit that to 3 minutes. We have a half hour to do that right now, and then it'll be carried over to the end of our regular agenda, actually be the consent agenda, and then we will continue with public comments if we can't get them all out right now, okay? So we'll have 3 minutes. And we can begin now.
Good morning. I'm George Farley, and I want to thank you for your time and your service to our county. I represent at least 95 citizens of our county. I'd like to address a recent application to the Planning Department for a zoning amendment and AUP for the business to be located at 1024 Highway 4 in the Central Business District of Arnold. Many in our community are strongly opposed to this business, which will be a second pot shop, not even a mile and a half from our first pot shop. Are there really enough seriously ill patients in our community that need medical marijuana for their illnesses to warrant a second pot shop? No, there are not. There aren't even enough to warrant the first pot shop that our previous supervisor supported and this board approved 2 years ago in spite of vigorous opposition from our community. We urge you to deny the zoning amendment because the CP zoning for professional offices is appropriate. After all, we're talking about medical marijuana, aren't we? Medical marijuana deserves medically professional zoning. Are you aware that we are developing a reputation that pot is king in Calaveras County? People will choose to go elsewhere for recreation and will also move elsewhere. Do you realize what this reputation will do to home values and county property tax revenues? Warren Camp put it well, and I quote, "I foresee Arnold receiving a harmful reputation for decades to come. Residents, renters, business professionals, and tourists will likely give Arnold a 5-star rating as being the Calaveras County seat of marijuana." We agree with Supervisor Michael Oliveira that any change in zoning is unacceptable. We do not agree with Planning Director Maurer, who at your January 26th meeting implied that a pot shop that sells a Schedule I, which is the most dangerous controlled substance, is equivalent to a gas station or a grocery store, and so the numbers of pot shops do not need to be regulated.
All right, sir,
Yes.
just want to remind you that what you're talking about is pretty much the whole agenda for today. And for public comment, it's everything else other than what's on the agenda. You'll have plenty of time for your comments during the agenda item.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that this particular item of being a zoning amendment and an AUP for this particular property is something that I'm addressing specifically. I'm
Well,
not-
actually, the zoning amendments and all of that are included in the ordinance. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, the ordinance.
Is this specific property, is this on the agenda today?
It's a property, any property in Calaveras County that's within the ordinance is on the agenda. So you actually came away with like 2 minutes of time, and you're going to get another 3 minutes, so I...
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
That's kind of a deal, really. Caught me off guard. Just tilt it down.
Yes, I know. My name is Manuelita Arrieta, and I am a full-time 15-year resident of Arnold. And I'm hoping that I'm not cut off of my comments either.
Well, if it has to do with the ordinance, the marijuana ordinance, then you.
Well, what
then
are
I
the
will stop
public?
you.
Okay, I'm going to start. Okay, let me just start.
Okay.
The residents of Arnold are very troubled over the possible approval of yet another marijuana shop in our family quiet center town of Arnold. We didn't need the first one, and we certainly don't need a second one in close proximity to it.
So
Our-
so this is actually has to do with the marijuana ordinance.
It does.
Okay, if it does, then you'll have an opportunity to have your 3 minutes during the public comment period for that item.
Well, my understanding
This
was,
is
what's
just-
the public comment then? What is the public comment
For
between?
anything other than RCD and marijuana ordinance.
Well, that should have been stated ahead of time.
You're right. I will disclose that right now.
Okay.
So just a reminder, sorry, not used to such large crowds at our meetings. Any item of interest to the public that is within subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed. That's better. During the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the regular agenda. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued at the conclusion of the consent agenda in order to provide an opportunity for remainder of comments to be heard. Any discussion in public comment on the RCD or the marijuana issue is on our agenda and may not be discussed during public comment. And just to let you guys know, we have a professional commenter here in Peter Race, and he will show you how to do that.
You promise you don't dispense with me too quickly? My name is Peter Race from General Inn, and I want to bring to your attention, and maybe hopefully that you can consider, the Board of Supervisors used to have a meeting every week. Now, this is a time of emergency.
Special.
Pretty heavy, please. Pretty heavy emergency, and I know, folks, you've been working your butt off, and I appreciate it. But like last meeting, over 1,000 pages, it doesn't do justice to you, because it's not going to make you look like the smartest people, because 1,000 pages you're getting on a Friday night. I don't care how brilliant you are. You're not going to comprehend and make a total decision on it. And I'm sure you got fantastic staff. They prepare you for it, but it's not fair to you. It's not fair to the people. That's one. The other thing is, I noticed some comments that you had a contract for a couple of years now to post legal notification in publications. And it's way past due, I believe, that's supposed to be reconsidered, because the last time your constituents end up paying 45% higher than the next bid. I wonder if that's ever going to be considered again, and take a look at it. I don't know who's been making the decision to keep renewing those contracts, but, and I do stop by here once in a while, and I know there's nothing been said about it for quite a long time. Next one. You 5 folks, and I'm sure you volunteered very happily to be the representative of CSA 1. And I know you're very concerned about. And I'm sure you realize when you assume the fiduciary and legal consequences of being the representative of CSA 1, you also anointed me to stick my nose into your district, since as I am one of the victims of CSA 1.
30 seconds.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome back. I love spending my money to have something administered for no services. And I'm sure you're aware of it, right? Because you decided that you're going to take up on a fiduciary responsibility and due diligence of the highest income for service districts in the county. About 2/3 of county service district income is CSA 1.
Thank you, Peter.
So please, consider it. Let's have fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, folks. My name's Bonnie Newman. I'm from Double Springs. And I'd like to address something that's concerned me since the last meeting. We had a hearing involving the asphalt plant, and we noticed that there was law enforcement asked to participate and observe. My question was, are the meetings so unruly that we need to have law enforcement attend? Who decided to ask law enforcement at last Tuesday's meeting? And my comment is, I think it costs about $500 or $600 to have a law enforcement officer come and monitor our meetings. $500 or $600 can be used to generate a penny an hour raise for every home care worker in Calaveras County for an entire year. So every time you guys fritter away $600, that's a penny that we could use. Every time you fritter away $5,000 or $6,000, that's a 10-cent an hour raise. And if you could see clear to come up with $50,000 or $60,000 out of all the expenses that you guys think are important enough to spend money on, that could be $1 an hour raise for every home care worker in Calaveras County for an entire year who have not had a pay raise since 2009. Thank you.
My name is John Wickham. I've lived in this county since '77. I've had several businesses in this county, and I have literally hired hundreds of Calaveras County residents. This county has not always been, in the last 40 years, the easiest county to make a living in. And those of us who have lived here for nearly 40 years or more, we live here because we love it. We support it. We're not the ones who lived in the Bay Area and made the money and thought about someday moving to Calaveras so they could retire. We're the ones who've been supporting Calaveras for all these years. I'm here in support of laws that allow individuals to grow marijuana so that they are not in conflict with the county, law enforcement.
So this is on our agenda.
It is?
Yeah, so you'll be able to speak on that during the agenda item.
I guess I misunderstood. Sorry.
That's okay.
I wasn't prepared to make a statement on this today. However, I'm here in for some of the new supervisors that are in their first term, and maybe some of those that even were here when I was on the board. It may be something new to them. So I'm going to give you a little history lesson for kind of decrypt what Peter was talking about in terms of the paper, the newspaper. The law requires that every year, annually, that the board conducts a request for proposal from any newspapers that are located within the county to give a bid for things that the county has to print by law in the newspaper. So there's a number of different things, job openings, public meeting announcements, all kind of things. So that bid's supposed to take place once a year. In 2011, my first year in office, there had not been a bid for about 7 years. And so I requested and persevered until they had a bid. The only 2 newspapers in the county that are adjudicated or were to be able to bid on it were the Valley Springs News and the Calaveras Enterprise. And those are still the only newspapers, to my knowledge, in the county that have the ability to even place a bid. What was brought up in 2011 was that Calaveras Enterprise actually did not meet the qualifications for adjudication, and therefore their bid should not be considered. California state law says that any newspaper that is adjudicated and receives state or local funding must be adjudicated, and there's two stakes that have to be accomplished for legal purposes. Number one, the paper has to be published in the county. Now, publishing means the typing and the editing and all that kind of stuff. Number two, the second prong, is that the paper must be printed in the county. Okay? Both of those prongs have to be made, or it is not a legal binding contract. So what we had in 2011 was we had the Calaveras Enterprise, who was adjudicated previously, but in 2010 their printing press broke. And they decided, instead of investing $2 million in a new printing press, that they would just lay off 9 employees in the printing department, and they subletted the printing to a print shop in Galt. Well, Galt is not in Calaveras County. Therefore, they do not meet the 2 prongs that the state required for legally adjudicated newspapers in this county. That leaves you with only 1 newspaper, Valley Springs News, that could be able to serve the county per county code and state code on a contract. That anyone else that's not adjudicated shouldn't even be considered because it's illegal, technically. Okay. The other thing that was brought up about the 45% increase also was brought out during those proceedings. The Calaveras Enterprise is paid by the inch of columns that go down the side of the paper. Okay. Well, what they did was, without asking the board or the county, they just made an executive decision on their own that they were going to narrow the columns in their newspaper. So instead of having wider columns and less length, they had narrower columns that were longer because they get paid by the inch from the county on the length. So they gave themselves a significant raise without any oversight and without asking any questions, and we approved it. The board, when I say we. So there's your decrypted.
Thank you, Mr.
history
Spellman.
lesson. All right.
Any other public comments that does not include? Okay. All right, so we have, all right.
Hello, I'm Dr. Prapana Randall Smith, and there's been something on my mind that I've been thinking about ever since I met Mr. Edson a couple years ago, and I don't think I'll ever have an audience like this to discuss this. We discussed education, and I learned that this county sends something to the tune of $2 million a year to a community college district in the Valley that doesn't offer classes for our citizens here. My question to this body and to everybody here is, why don't we have our own Calaveras Community College District and our own Calaveras Community College? Arguably, we can get that $2 million back. And the windfall that we're looking at, possibly discussing today, we can have that college right here. Thank you.
I'd just like to share with the board and the public, everybody's aware, or most people are aware, that our building official retired last week. Jeff White had been with the county for 30 years, not in that capacity, but for the building official for probably the last 8 or more years. With that said, there is an open recruitment for a new building official, but in the interim, what the board has decided is to contract with a company called Interwest. And in that company, they have sent us somebody by the name of Michael Renner, who is here today. I just want to introduce him to the board. He is going to be our interim building official until that position is filled. So can you come on up, Michael?
Good morning, members of the board. As Brian said, I'm with a private consulting firm. I just recently finished helping Napa County in their disaster recovery process through their earthquake. Looking forward to helping you guys out with your challenges and helping out with your recruitment process. Doors always open, 100%. I'll give all the board members my personal cell. And my door's open to all you guys as well, obviously. Please come to me with any questions or concerns at any time. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Guys, I was wondering if it's possible if we could just turn up the volume on the PA system. It's a little bit hard to hear back there.
We'll try.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments that don't have to do with our agenda items? Guess that explains it. All right. So we are going to go to our regular agenda, and this has to do with the RCD.
Okay. Some people may be aware of the Resource Conservation District proposal that we've been working on for some time in the county. The board has been taking action on moving forward on that. There are several members of the community that also have been proponents of this as well. The next step in the process is actually to place the item not only on the ballot, but to, which has been done, but to also give arguments for, against, or otherwise. So what is before the board today is adopt the language for ballot argument in favor of Measure A, which is what is going to be the RCD formation, in conformance with Public Resources Code, and delegate rebuttal argument to County Council. And then just a little bit of background real quickly. On February 9th, 2016, the board voted to place Measure A on the ballot, kind of discussed that already. And for the ballot for the June 7th, 2016 primary elections, Measure A will be, again, being the formation of the Calaveras County RCD, or Resource Conservation District. The election official is now required to meet a tight series of deadlines for public notice and solicitation of arguments for and or against, as well as rebuttal arguments. And so the Public Resources Code allows the Board of Supervisors or individual members authorized by the board to prepare an argument in favor of a proposed RCD and submit it to the elections official for potential publication on the ballot. The argument in favor must be 300 words or less, and this has been formed by County Council.
Good morning. I know this is why you're all here. We'll try to get through it as expeditiously as possible. The County Council's office will be separately, is required to separately prepare a neutral discussion of what an RCD is. So a different attorney in our office will be preparing independently a neutral statement to appear on the ballot. This is simply an opportunity that is provided in the Public Resources Code and in the Elections Code for the proponent of an RCD, in this case the Board of Supervisors and LAFCO. Either one of them can prepare an argument for, and the reason it's on today's agenda is the Elections Office has an extremely tight deadline for getting these in because there has to be time for rebuttal.
Any questions of the board? Again, our recommendation is adopting the language for ballot argument in favor of Measure A for RCD formation. Sure. Again, we are recommending adoption of language for ballot argument in favor of Measure A RCD formation.
Well, we're going to have to do public comments on it anyhow. Okay. And but we will have to do public comments. So that's, you want to do that now, or you want to make a comment?
I'd just like to add a comment. I've read the language to go into the ballot, and there's lots of concerns or discussions or perceptions about whether or not this is a taxing agency. And I know that we are proposing that it not be, and that it's going to be grants and such. And the other thing I hear most often is how the governing board is going to be formed or appointed. And so I would say, and like to have this considered for language, to at the very end where it says, best of all, Measure A does not impose any new tax or fee. The Calaveras County Resource Conservation District will be funded entirely by grants and private contributions, and its governing body will be volunteers, appointed by the Board of Supervisors, so that it's clear to the voters that where the volunteers might be coming from and who they're appointed by.
Supervisor Ponte, that is correct for the first Resource Conservation District Board. After that, the Resource Conservation District itself will have to decide whether or not to pass a resolution to allow its vacancies to continue to be filled by the board.
Okay. I just think there needs to be some kind of language then that confirms what it is as it goes on the ballot, if that's possible.
Supervisor, would you read your correction one more time to that?
Well, it's my understanding that initially, as the RCD, if it's voted upon, that the board will be the founding board, you might say, and at some point soon after, the board will be appointing volunteers to serve as the RCD board. So that's my understanding. In this argument in favor, to me, it doesn't say that, and it leaves it vague. So I think in fairness to the voters, it's important to note who the volunteers will be or how they're appointed or something in somewhat simple language. So I just am suggesting that its governing body will be volunteers appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
I mean, we could add a clause at the end, comma, the initial one to be appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
That's kind of like, that's what you said.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I would concur with Supervisor Ponte on that language addition. One quick question. Will the RCD be structured in the same manner such as COG, where they're an independent board, but the oversight and final decision would be to the Board of Supervisors on issues? It's just they're independently by themselves.
My understanding is they are an independent board. No, they are not. My understanding is, no, they're not accountable to the Board of Supervisors. Julie, you want to weigh in on that?
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of trying to figure out how to get the language on the original. What was the question?
Very clearly, the question is, will the Board of Supervisors have any authority over the RCD once it is established as its own board? My understanding is it will not.
No, the only power that the Board of Supervisors will have is the initial appointment or to fill vacancies if the governing body that's appointed elects to have their vacancies filled by the board. It is a special district that's independent.
Yeah, that's great. I would concur with Supervisor Ponte.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Public comments on RCD?
I think I heard it clearly that the initial appointments will be made by the Board of Supervisors, but the concurrent appointments or placement in the board, it sounds like to me it would be something similar to the Planning Commission, where the Board of Supervisors is appointing someone, but now I'm hearing that it's an independent district. So if it's an independent special district, then how is it, especially if is this RCD to cover the whole county or a specific watershed area? Because if it's the whole county, I mean, that That's a lot different. Most of these special districts are geographically confined to a certain area for a certain purpose. So I'm not sure, at least for myself, I'm not too clear on, after the initial appointments have gone through, how is it that those people are replaced? What's the process? Is it a voting process? I mean, how about if you have 20 volunteers? Who gets chosen?
All right, so initially the board would appoint the directors or members of our RCD board, and one from each district, one from the ag community, and one from the water district or wastewater district community, so that we can have, basically it's keeps it balanced and what its intention is for, which is improving our agricultural possibilities within the county. So and fire safe and wildfire danger and all the other flood control and everything else. So after the initial appointments, then it becomes its own special district, and it will have its own elections.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to address the area, it will cover all of the unincorporated area of Calaveras County, i.e. it will not include Angels Camp, at least at this time. Angels Camp does have an opportunity at a later date to join in the RCD, should it be established, if they wish. The other area it does not include are East Bay mud lands along the McCollum River, which are already included, I want to say, in the Amador RCD. That is something else that can be addressed once this board is established, if approved by the electorate.
Okay, well, my understanding is sufficient for the moment. I don't want to keep anybody else longer than necessary.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Turner with the Clerk Recorder's Office and the Registrar of Voters. My understanding from reading the LAFCO resolution passed, this will not be elected. The members of this board will always be appointed by the Board of Supervisors. The initial will be appointed for a 2-year term, only because there's going to be 7 members, and the initial will be appointed for a 2-year. If you read Section 15 of the LAFCO resolution, that was my understanding from that. So there will be 7 members to be appointed at large by the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors, and they're supposed to be staggered. So 3 of those members will be appointed for a 4-year, and the rest will be appointed for a 2-year, and then the staggering should continue. So unless we changed our resolution, it wouldn't match what the LAFCO resolution passed.
I'm sorry that there's some confusion that's arisen. My understanding of how the law works, which the LAFCO would have to follow for the RCD, is that it's only the initial board that is the initial board is appointed by the board of.
Can you turn the volume up a little bit? The volume is up as loud as it can go. So. If I realize that this is a big crowd, no matter what. So we're just going to have to deal through this. Please try not to make any outbursts. It makes it harder to hear, and keep the chatter down, please.
My understanding is that the special district would have the capacity to make its own decision after it's initially appointed by the board. It would have to resolve whether or not to let the board continue to appoint. That is what the Public Resources Code states. So I don't think there's anything in the LAFCO resolution that could go outside of state law. But today, this is already on the ballot. This is the only issue today is whether or not the Board of Supervisors wishes to adopt language in support of the formation of the district. The one thing I realized when proposing some additional language in response to Supervisor Ponte's question is that there is a 300-word limit, and so the addition of those words would take us outside. I think we have 1 word left that we can put in, and so my alternative proposition would simply to put, and its board-appointed governing body will be volunteers, inserting 1 word at the end in front of governing body. That is correct, and that the initial governing body would be board appointed. But I'm hoping that the neutral statement written by the County Council's office describing the Resource Conservation District will clarify for the voters how subsequent members of the Resource Conservation District will come into power after there's a vacancy in the office, and that will be clarified in that neutral statement for the ballot.
My only comment to that then is, if it helps, the title does not get included in the 300 words, and we have that you have 9 words. So.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I do want to add that this has to be approved by next Tuesday at 5 and in our office at 5. So.
Okay. Next.
Marty Crane, thank you, Debbie, for bringing that clarification. I think it's very important for the public trust to understand that this will be their resource conservation district. And Supervisor Ponte brought up a question. I know we're just here to talk about the argument in favor of, but I think whenever we do anything, we need to at least be aware of the costs. And Supervisor Ponte asked what the upfront costs would be, and we didn't know last week. I'm hoping that we have that answer today, or something in the ballpark. Thank you.
Joe Kelly from the abandoned area of District 1. I'm very much concerned about this now, since Supervisor Ponte brought it up. Board of Supervisors, initial board. That means we're paying for it. But the other thing I'm concerned about is, what will they be doing initially? Are they only going to be looking at the concept of appointing a new board, or will they be starting the process of attempting to get monies? There's the questions. Otherwise, if they're going to be starting it up, leave the board out. Let the appointments happen without the initial RCD being put in place. I also look at this RCD, and when I say that, as the board being put in place, let them come along and start the process, rather than the Board of Supervisors if it's a chase of money on this. I'm also concerned about the competition that's going to be here with an RCD, although I do see it has probably its own way of collecting or going after these monies. But I look at it, we have an NRCS, National Resource Conservation Service, in Amador, in Tuolumne, with an FSA, a Farm Service Agency. These deal with most agriculture matters. And what I see with that is, the thing I've been looking at it is now they're out till next year before they can do any funding things that come to them this year. How soon before this happens with RCD, that you're out a year or more? And how long is it going to take this RCD to get established to be able to, and this is conceptual, to be able to start trying to fund some of the projects that might come before it and be approved? How many years are we looking at as this thing comes from infancy up to maturity? Thank you.
Any other comments on the RCD? So by the end of the meeting, we should be able to have the language, right? You want to bring it back to the end of the meeting?
I believe that we could write in, again, a clause, and still, I counted the letters, or the words for what I had originally proposed, and it's 11, and I have 9. So looking at how to rephrase it again, I think that we could say, and its governing body initially appointed by the Board of Supervisors, comma, will be volunteers. And I'm happy to write that into the original resolution for signature by the board if it passes. We're only here today to discuss the language of the argument for. So if the board wants to take action on that now, I think it can.
All right, that sounds good.
Kevin Wright, Agricultural Commissioner. I think it's very important to know how the appointment for the future will take place before we take an action on this item. So, and it should be clear to the voters how these appointments will be made. That being said, I'm very for an RCD in the county. It's needed. It will attract talented people to help us solve complicated problems that we have in the county. There's lots of opportunities out there. Carbon sequestration, fire suppression, land management. We've had a 72,000 acre fire. What we need is some education and some programs up there to deal with management of that particular land. Groundwater management's an issue. And land and forest management for our clean water. Those are just four off the top of my head that are going to require a lot of expertise that can be provided by the RCDs. And the RCDs work in concert with the NRCS and Farm Services Agency. They'll be looking to those particular entities to try to get some of these contracts and grants. And they'll work in concert with the Ag Department too. And there will be opportunities to work together on weed management, and noxious weeds, and other issues between the two, between us and them. But it's very, very important to know how this appointment is going to take place, and down the line how the proceeding or the consequential appointments will take place. And since it is agriculture related, even the appointments from the districts hopefully will be people who are familiar with agriculture. I'm sure that probably goes without saying as far as you guys go. The other thing is, I think this Thursday at 3 p.m. at the library, for people who are interested in being part of the RCD, we're having a meeting. So if there are people who are interested in being on the RCD, they should come, and it'll be explained a little bit further, and perhaps some of you can be there and clarify a little bit more as far as how these appointments will take place. The other final thing about this is that just because there's 7 members on an RCD doesn't mean those will be the only people who are participating in helping to solve some of these problems. These members of the RCD can go out in the community and get feedback from other people, and I'm sure there'll be other volunteers who are going to be interested and active in helping us solve some of these problems and opportunities. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Oh, it's 3 p.m. at the library on Thursday.
All right,
Chair.
any other comments?
I just wanted to clarify so everyone is clear on the process. Under the Public Resource Code, it allows for either the election or the appointment of the board. The LAFCO elected for this board to appoint the initial board of the special district. So that is what will happen, is this board will move forward with the appointment of the initial board. Then that board of the RCD will have the ability to decide whether they want to allow this board to continue with appointments for filling vacancies, or if they want to allow for the vacancies to be filled by an election. That will be up to that board to determine how they want future vacancies to be filled. So hopefully that explains the process a little bit better. If you have any questions, certainly let us know. But for purposes of the initial board, this Board of Supervisors will be appointing to fill that.
Chair Edson? You know, I appreciate that, Megan, and that's just my whole point to this, is that folks just don't know or don't understand. So that's why I think it's important that some kind of language is put in the argument for the favor. Julie mentioned about the neutral position, can go into more detail, and that's fine. But I just think it's important that it's noted there as people are trying to make an educated vote. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments on this item? I want to make a comment too. I plan on holding a meeting, and I will probably hold it here on RCD, and I will have a lot of experts, people that are involved in every aspect of it, to come here and speak on it so that the public has a chance to clearly understand everything that there is involved with it. I've done quite a little bit of research on it actually, and to me, it's one of the most important things that can happen in our county. It does something that really government can't do. We have 75% of our county is private property owned, and RCD can work with private property owners to help them with projects on their property as well. So there's many things that we can do that we can't currently do, and it will be an asset to our county, as our ag commissioner came in and let us know. So we have to make a motion on this. Okay, so can I have a motion on the item, please?
Question for Mr. Chair. Are we moving to the addition or the statement as stands?
So we're
referencing Supervisor Ponte's addition.
Want to read the statement, Shirley, please?
Do you want me to read the entire statement?
Might as well.
Okay. Argument in favor of Measure A, Resource Conservation Districts, RCDs, once known as Soil Conservation Districts, are special districts set up under California law to be locally governed agencies with their own locally appointed or elected independent boards of directors. Your yes vote on Measure A will help local residents to organize local solutions to local agricultural and resource conservation problems such as drought, watershed management, post-disaster recovery, soil and rangeland conservation, control of exotic plant species, wildlife habitat enhancement and restoration, and education of the public about local resource management issues. Rather than leaving these matters to be resolved solely by the state and federal governments on our behalf, Measure A will create a local entity with its own authority to apply for federal and state grants and private contributions for projects designed specifically to address the resource management goals and concerns of the local community. Grant-funded RCD projects can provide both direct assistance and educational opportunities to private landowners, ranchers, foresters, and farmers wishing to preserve water, soil, and other resources to improve the economic viability of their operations and to improve the ecological health of our region. There are over 100 resource conservation districts in the state of California, and the vast majority of California is currently being served by one, including Amador County and Tuolumne County. Calaveras County should not be left out. RCDs sponsor an enormous array of services and projects across the state, assisting agriculturalists and the community at large with everything from fire protection and drought management strategies to post-disaster land restoration efforts. Best of all, Measure A does not impose any new tax or fee. The Calaveras County Resource Conservation District will be funded entirely by grants and private contributions, and its governing body, initially appointed by the Board of Supervisors, will be volunteers. Please vote yes on Measure A.
Okay, so can I have a motion on that, please?
I do have a question first.
I also do. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So just to be clear, this is a form of government, right? This isn't a private entity. This is just another special district that is part of government.
Yes.
Yes, it is a special district. It will have independence from the Board of Supervisors once appointed.
Right, but it will still be answerable to all the people of Calaveras.
Yes, and they'll be subject to the Brown Act. They'll have to file Form 700s, et cetera.
Okay.
Yes.
And then as far as the taxation question that comes up all the time, will this body have the ability to tax?
No, part of its formation criteria is that it will not. So that was an option, but we did not set it up that way. And under the LAFCO resolution, it will not have any taxing authority.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Tax, no tax or regulation.
Chair, we're also making a motion to delegate the rebuttal argument to County Council, correct?
That's correct.
It's not just what she just read, but also something that hasn't been.
designed yet.
If an argument is submitted against the RCD, then the Board of Supervisors can authorize a rebuttal, and it could either hold a special meeting to determine what the language of the rebuttal will be, or it can, under the elections code, it can delegate that to somebody else. And because and so our recommendation was simply that if somebody does submit an argument against, to delegate that to Ms. Stedfeld on the Board of Supervisors' behalf, so that there's not, just a blank space for rebuttal, because the board will not be meeting prior to the time that that's due.
I move to accept the languages read and corrected, and also to delegate the rebuttal argument to county council.
I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion by Supervisor Kearney, second by Supervisor Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
A little point of order, please.
Point of order.
I was trying to catch you before you took your vote. Historically, whenever there is an item before the board and public makes comments and they raise questions before the vote is taken, you answer those questions or at least address those concerns. I still would like to have Supervisor Ponte's question answered. If you don't have the answer, just say so. But she wanted to know, I asked a few minutes ago, Supervisor Ponte brought this up before, she was supportive of the RCD, but she wanted to know, because this board has a huge fiduciary responsibility to this county and the taxpayers, she just wanted to know, what is the upfront cost? Because it was stated in the meeting prior to this that there is upfront cost. So I'd just like to know. We should know. We just should know.
Marty, I think I can address that for you. It was brought up last week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to say that the upfront cost to the elections office is $8,500. That does not include the staff time, which was, I want to say, another $4,000. But again, as the CAO pointed out last week, that is time that is going to be spent by staff in that office, in other duties as well. But as far as my understanding is, the actual cost of putting this on the ballot, Becky, please correct me if I'm wrong, it was $8,500 plus the staff time.
That was a rough estimate that we sent to admin, and yes, you're correct. I did want to point out that the board could direct the auditor to do a financial for the district as well, if that was something you're interested in doing, but it's due at the same time as the impartial, so it would be very quick study of the finances of what the district would impact the county, or how it would impact the county.
Chair?
Go ahead, Debbie.
So with that, I understand if the impartial, when is the impartial argument due?
The impartial is due March 11th.
So is it possible then to have direct staff to come up with the auditor's financial overview on this and present it at the next board meeting?
Yes, I believe, Supervisor Ponte, I believe that we could. I hadn't spoken to Rebecca Callan about the financial audit part. It is something that would have to be directed by the Board of Supervisors, but I could agendize that.
Chair, I have a question, maybe a comment.
Sure.
Ms. Turner, does your office contain a budget item for this particular issue?
We did not. However, at mid-year, since this came up kind of timely for mid-year, we are able to include it, and it will. We will get an additional $8,000 for the printing portion of the election.
And we have that budgeted amount allocated for situations like this without an audit, or?
It was not allocated prior. At mid-year, I had requested the additional monies, and it will be coming before the board at that time.
So at mid-year, we're going to know what it costs anyhow.
Well, at mid-year, we estimated, based off of how long we spent to date, that it was going to be $8,000, and that's what we requested to have included in our budget.
All right, so I would be in favor of just waiting until then, because otherwise we're going to be spending extra money on trying to figure out how much it costs. And it's going to be really close to the ballpark anyhow. Why did you choose 8,000?
So the $8,000 cost is only the cost of my office to get it on the ballot for June. A fiscal impact statement by the auditor would be a fiscal impact of the county, what it costs year after year to have this additional special district. So it's two different costs. My cost is just, this is the increase of this item puts on the ballot for June, and the fiscal impact is what is the year-over-year cost of the special district, and that's what the auditor would be looking into.
Okay.
And just one point of clarification, the RCD, I believe, would have to raise its own funds to fund an election. If it chose to not have its vacancies filled by the board, it would be up to that special district to pay its own costs to the elections department.
Which is their choice.
Correct.
I agree with you. So.
Okay. All right, so now we can get back to our agenda. So I have a motion by Supervisor Kearney, second by Supervisor Wright.
We've already voted.
Oh, we already said all in favor, aye. Okay, let's get on to the next one. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Ask everybody to be seated. We want to get along with this, okay? Thank you.
Who's that?
Who are you?
Oh.
First man in line.
Relax. What's that? Is that what you want to do? All right, let's find a place. This is going to be quite a long part of the meeting, so if you can find a seat to sit in, that would probably be great. All right, so we have some presentation by admin on this subject. And it'll first we'll have the presentations, and then we will move to the public comments on that. So it's going to be a little while still, guys. Okay.
All right, good morning, everyone. Got it. All right, we're back here again to discuss medical marijuana and how the county wants to regulate it. As most of you know, we were here at the end of January, had a lengthy conversation at that point. And I am Megan Stedfeld, County Counsel. Julie Moss-Lewis, Deputy County Counsel, is here to my left, and Peter Maurer, the Planning Director, is here as well. At the last meeting in January, the board did ask that we hold today's meeting to give everyone ample time to review the ordinance that our office had prepared based on the direction that we received in December 22nd. So that's why we are here today. They also asked that we have staff from Environmental Health, the District Attorney, Sheriff's Office, the Ag Commissioner, Code Compliance, and Planning to be here to answer questions and to provide any comments that they have on the subject. So we do have people here today for those purposes. Just as a side note, as the board knows, one of the things that was causing this to be an urgent matter was the March 1st deadline. As you know, on February 3rd, the governor signed AB 21, which removed that deadline, so we at least don't have that urgency looming over us. So for purposes of today, I would just ask that we allow for staff to make the presentation that they have have prepared for, and allow for comment, and then provide our office additional direction on what you would like to see, And then from here forward, we would process an ordinance through the normal channels, since it is a zoning ordinance, that it would go to the Planning Commission first and then back to the board for adoption. It would no longer be an urgency ordinance, which it was back at the end of January. So for today's purposes, it's my understanding that the Ag Commissioner wanted to make some comments, and we would start off with him, and then the District Attorney and the Sheriff's Office have PowerPoint presentations that they would like to make. So we'll go in that order, and because of the PowerPoint presentations, after each of the presentations, I would just ask that we take a very brief pause to allow for setup of the next presentation, and then from there we'll move on. Get started. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here and able to comment on the ordinance. Yogi Berra said, when you don't know where you're going, you need to be careful because you might not get there. Thankfully, we've been given some time here now to go through the process of this ordinance in a thoughtful and deliberate manner. As you mentioned, since passage of AB 21, thankfully gave us some time to establish our ordinance. Generally, the California Constitution is required to reimburse local agencies for certain costs mandated by the state. But language in this bill is unclear as to how and when this will happen. So a budget is very important. But it's stated in the initial bill that the initial funds generated by the licensing fees will be used to pay back the $10 million loan from the general fund to the state agencies by January 1st, 2022. And this is the monies that's been loaned to the agencies to establish their procedures. It also states that funds from fines and penalties, and not the licensing fees, are earmarked for the grant program for the counties, but only after the state loan is repaid. So there are no funds that are going to be coming from the state for our help in the enforcement of this ordinance anytime soon. In my conversations with the liaison from the Department of Food and Agriculture, his licensing program will not be in place until the end of 2018 at the earliest. Growers will not be able to obtain a state license until that time. Consequently, no funds will be there from the state to give back to the county. There's also talk to having to do an environmental impact report at the state level before proceeding. So the end of 2018 is probably optimistic. It's become increasingly clear to me that the early cost of our ordinance will fall on our own shoulders, and therefore substantial study should be undertaken to arrive at the fee structure. Although the county will be able to recover administrative costs through our own permitting and zoning clearance process, an estimate of the revenue and expense of how these funds will be used should be planned. In order to ensure participation by the cannabis cultivators and have a successful program and a successful ordinance, a strong enforcement presence will be needed. Without an incentive to sign up participants, grower participation may be minimal. The funds will be needed for extra staffing from the Sheriff's Department, as neither the code compliance or the Ag Department are trained to handle problem grows and will only be checking those grows that actually sign up for the program. If the administrative fees do not cover the extra staffing, the county should entertain the possibility of generating revenue through a special tax on the medical cannabis growers on a cost per square foot growing ground. The reason why I say this is because this program or this ordinance will not work unless there is a strong enforcement and safety aspect to it. Other concerns. There's a general concern with the public that a 30-foot buffer for commercial grows is inadequate. And marijuana in rural residential parcels will lower property values on the surrounding properties. I believe that proper zoning that is already in place is the key to solving this problem and keeping the neighbor altercations and nuisance complaints to a minimum. Our zoning already states that rural residential is for personal ag use and not for commercial operations. Residential zone, 100 square feet per person, or 100 square foot per person within the provider is adequate. However, residential ag parcels at a minimum is where the commercial marijuana operations should be sited, not rural residential. In keeping with our county code that is already established, if you think of medical marijuana as chickens, you almost have the same problems. A rural residential, you can have a few chickens, have your eggs, be good. However, you don't want to cite a commercial operation for chickens on a rural residential zone. So there has to be a distinct, distinguishable between what is the personal and what is commercial, and thereby just use the zoning that we have to keep things in order. If in fact medical marijuana grows are to be protected under the right to farm and nuisance exemptions, then they need to follow established standards for zoning. As far as the buffers will take care of themselves on these properties because of the way the zoning laws are written, and thereby not set a precedent to other ag operations like backyard chickens versus commercial poultry operations. As far as the question that has been raised on cannabis on ag preserved land, according to the Conservation District's own laws, an ag commodity definition of an ag commodity is any and all plant and animal products produced in the state for commercial purposes. Therefore, medical marijuana would fall under as an ag commodity. The question is whether this definition will be changed by the Department of Conservation or make an exception going forward. This question, I have asked the Department of Conservation what their opinion is or guidance on this, and we are waiting for guidance from the Department of Conservation. And most of the ranchers out there are in agreement on this. Wait for guidance and see what they say. Our own resolution states that ag preserves have to be a minimum of 50-acre size, 100 acres for rangeland, although exceptions can be made for unique properties. The main concern with the ag community is that they do not want to lose their Williamson Act opportunity because of medical marijuana. Most would like to see a strong enforcement program, as cartel grows have been found on properties that the owners didn't even know existed. So our recommendation on cannabis on ag land is to wait and see what the Department of Conservation has to say as far as some guidance to us. As far as the Ag Department involvement, our Department of Agriculture should and deserves a place in the ordinance. We are well versed in issuing over-the-counter type of licenses with the issuing of operator IDs for pesticide use that includes a map. We have a computer program in place that estimates acreage and capture most of the pertinent information that's needed. We also already work with the State Department of Agriculture, Department of Pesticide Regulation, and are well versed with their contract procedures and issues that may come up that have to do with pesticide use on medical cannabis grows. We already have guidance from the state as far as issuing of operator IDs, and we will visit the growers to inspect their storage and test their scales and packaging as part of our weights and measures programs. It would be easier on the cannabis industry as well as the county to include the Ag Commissioner as part of the program. In summary, cannabis for the purpose of the Act is an ag commodity, and in long term it will be a mainstream product. It is in the general interest of Calaveras County to pass an ordinance with strong enforcement funding for the protection of both the citizens of the county and protection of the legal growers of medical marijuana, rather than have an unregulated industry with little or no environmental or safety components. Thank you.
Kevin. Thank you for that information. I did have a question regarding the position of the Ag Department and the role of issuing permits and such. That does seem like a good idea, certainly since it's an ag crop. But I'm just concerned or wondering if you thought through the permit process and what happens if there's a violation and if people appeal the permit. Do you have a system set up already through the Ag Department to do that?
It's still in the very early stages. I think we would work with the county council and with code compliance too, as far as the enforcement procedures and the planning department. So we're still very early. We would have to get together with them. As far as something in the law that allows us to do that, there is nuisance abatement laws that the Ag Commissioner is empowered to enforce through administrative hearings. It's in the Food and Ag Code. But most of these presently just concern pests that are found and nuisances from pests being on a particular crop or an abandoned crop or a neglected crop. It doesn't have to do specifically with some person not following an ordinance like this.
Right.
So, but this isn't to say that in the future that won't be written into the Food and Ag Code, because it's the Department of Food and Agriculture who are supposed to be regulating it from the state. So it's a possibility that it could go that way. On the other hand, for the present moment, there's no licensing even through them, and it won't be for a couple of years. So we would get together with Megan and her crew, plus the planner, and code compliance to figure out proper procedures for that.
Right. And now code compliance already has a system set up in place to deal with these types of issues. That's why I was thinking, that it'd be easier transition. Maybe have you guys divide the workload up there with the issuing of permits and the code compliance kind of dealing with the appeals process and inspections.
Yeah. Well, I think we can both work together.
Yeah.
Come up with something.
Okay. Thank you.
Who's next, Megan?
The DA would be next for her presentation.
All right, so our district attorney, Barbara Yook, will give a presentation, and there's just a couple of minutes set up here for that. So
shouldn't take that long. I don't think it's going to take that long.
So, in the interest of time, there's a couple of things that we did last time in a large group like this that actually really worked well. The holding of applause, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people speaking today, and we could, if you multiply the time that it takes to applause for everybody, and holding of boos too, okay?
Just because I'm standing here?
No, that would probably be for me. And so,
Okay.
If we do that, last time it worked out a lot better, and I think that most of the people who were in that meeting would agree. So please, for one thing, hold the applauses, and let's be respectful to the people that are speaking. They have their point of view too. That's why we live in this great country, right? Everybody has a point. Everybody has a chance to speak. So, sorry, go ahead.
Good morning, Barbara Yook, District Attorney. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and to share some of our perspective on it from the perspective of the DA's office. Cliff, you might remember that one of my majors in college that I don't use anymore was economics. So for me, this was actually a very interesting topic to get into from the new business model, from this new commercial enterprise that is now law. So I do want to talk about the new commercialization of cannabis to make sure we're all on the same page with what's really happening here and what we're really talking about bringing to Calaveras County. As a new, Julie, it's not working.
Don't look at me.
No, the card has to be plugged into the computer. He was too far away.
Too far away.
Too far away. What?
So the center of this new commercial enterprise is the distribution center. And it's still not working.
Battery's dead.
And of course, the state also has the brand new bureaucracy created to oversee the new commercial enterprise. That's the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation under the Consumer Affairs Division. So we have the distribution center as kind of the center of this new commercial enterprise. And there's 6 components to it, 6 basic components. So go ahead. On the one side, we have the suppliers. These are the suppliers for the product stream. And you can see there's suppliers of different sizes. And that's one thing we'll be talking about a lot, and that we've been talking about a lot, is what type of suppliers are going to fit and fit well in Calaveras County. We have the small suppliers, we've got the medium, and then we've got the mega grows. You're talking about the 22,000 acre grows. So we have all different types of suppliers in this stream. The 22,000 feet?
It's
I'm sorry.
22,000 square feet.
Square feet, I'm sorry, 22,000 square feet. A little bit ahead of myself.
Let's keep it down, please.
Square feet, not acres. Okay. It's still large, it's still a mega grow. The 22,000 acres would be even bigger. But then we have the whole testing component, because now the marijuana and the edibles will go through some testing. And we also have the manufacturing of edibles. So this is anything that's taking the marijuana and converting it and making it into a different product. the oils, the hash, the edibles. It's not a food, not a drug anymore. And so that's what's going to be happening on that side. And then we have our retail sales. These are our dispensaries that we already have in the county on the end of it. So you can see it's very similar to any other type of commerce operation. You've got your suppliers, you've got your distribution, and then you've got your fronts, your stores that the product can be purchased in. The other component, I said there were 6. The 6th component is the transportation. The transportation to each of these locations is also regulated. So you've got your transportation going from your suppliers to the distribution centers. That's the only way it's supposed to get there. Part of the new system is that all the marijuana is identified and has unique identifiers so that it can be tracked and traced. From the distribution centers, if it's going to go to a manufacturer of edibles, and when it goes back and forth to the testing, that is also regulated. It has to be a licensed transporter. And then when it is finally done and ready for distribution from the wholesale to the retail, that is also by a licensed transporter. Now, there are some combo licenses that we haven't really talked about too much. There are certain parts of this that can be in combination. But that's something that we really haven't addressed. You could have a retail sale, I believe, combined with a manufacturer, and I believe a certain type of size of supplier as well. There are different combination licenses. So those are the basics of what we're talking about. Go ahead. Again. So I want to start at the back end because we're really familiar with how this is working already in the county. We already have some of the retail operations. We have the dispensaries.
Do you want to use the pointer?
No, I don't think so. That's fine. Unless I could point to Peter to tell him when to switch it. Okay, so we're sort of familiar with these. So this is what I want to start off with. Go ahead. The county's already been involved in this. The county already knows the issues that surround some of the dispensaries, the retail storefronts, and I imagine, based on what was happening earlier today, that there are some people who want to speak specifically on that as well, and some of the issues in the community with that. The current permitting structure that's in place, we've already gone through this. County Council, I know, and planning have already spent lots of time over the last few years dealing with the issue of where a retail sales operation should be taking place. So we're pretty familiar with that. What's new is the new wholesale and retail relationship. And if you recall, we have the distribution center, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having a big distribution center that is the only place that can supply the retail storefronts. Okay? And the tracking for that currently, I suppose we're going to be relying on the state agency to do that. I don't really know. And, you know, that's obviously someone's comfort level, how much you rely on a state agency to take care of what's coming into the county and how it's being monitored. And like I said, that's something that's just kind of a personal or professional comfort level on how much you want to rely on the state agency to take care of that issue and the fidelity of the tracking that has to happen. Go ahead. The dual licensings, I mentioned that already. We haven't talked about that too much and what's going to happen and what could happen with the dual licensing. The mobile delivery service, you know, we hear anecdotally that it's happening already. I do have a great concern about this, and I believe the Sheriff's Office is also going to be speaking about the mobile delivery service angle of it. If you do not ban it, it will happen, and there is no way to keep it from coming into the county. And, you know, if we have this big structure in place, and we're talking about the suppliers and ending up at the retail sales, if you have this influx of deliveries coming from out of county, well, there's no really way to track it. It's going to be non-trackable, non-taxable, and it's coming in. So I really think that we need to spend some more time on whether or not that is a good idea or not. It's going to cause problems. It's going to cause problems from a law enforcement angle, and I don't know that that's something that we are prepared to take on at this time. So we've talked about the end of it, the retail sales part of it. Let's go ahead and talk about the center. This is the meat of it, and this is probably where the big pool of jobs and taxes might be, but is Calaveras County the proper place for a big distribution center? Are we really ready for that? Do we have this infrastructure? Are our roads prepared for that? And it's not typically a place where we're going to attract that type of huge core of the industry. you're talking about maybe some place on I-5, Tracy, you're talking about different places like that that attract the large corporate centers. Is that something that you as policymakers want to do? Are you looking to attract, the big distribution center, manufacturing, and testing component? And if you did, are we ready? Do we have the infrastructure? And for this portion of it, you can see that since it all has to go through the distribution center, this would be where a lot of the regulatory oversight should be focused on, to make sure that what's coming in is going out and coming back in and going out appropriately, and there are proper controls on that. And once again, are we going to rely on the state to come in and watch all this, track all the numbers, make sure what's going in is coming out and it's not being diverted to the non-medical market? We do have ABC. They do come in, they do oversight of the liquor stores and the bars, they do stings, we do those cases, but that's the outside agency coming in, and what happens is when they do decide to come in, they burden law enforcement with assisting on these tasks, and then those cases flow to my office. So on the one hand, we're relying on the state agency to come in and do all that oversight, and then what flows from that is cases coming to our office. The medical board also does come in. We deal with them. We actually have the cigarette tax stamp agency. They come in. I can't say we've ever had a case from them, but I just want to let you know that when you do have this type of regulation and you do have a state bureaucracy that is overseeing it, number one, you're relying on them to do it, you're relying on them to do it robustly, you're relying on them to care about Calaveras County and what's happening here, and then when they do come in, they give us cases. I would submit to you, though, that just relying on the outside state agency to care what happens here is a little naive, and we need to take some of this on ourselves, and once again, who is going to do that and who is going to pay for it? Next, please. Keep going. I got ahead of myself, I think. Go ahead. Okay. So on the back end of this whole picture, one more, are the suppliers. And I've been to a couple of the study sessions, and I think the suppliers are probably the people that you've heard from most so far in this whole discussion. And what I want to point out to you is that the main issue, and what I think is getting missed a little bit, is that marijuana is different from other crops. It just is, because of its value and because of its readiness when it's growing off the plant. So, go ahead. So, and because of that, because it is different, because of how it grows and its value, we do have some grave crime concerns around growing marijuana. It's not tomatoes. If tomatoes were $1,000 a pound, or even $800 a pound, or $500 a pound, we'd have crime with tomatoes. We just would. So its inherent value causes an issue, and it's different, and it has to be treated differently. It's not wine grapes. So it's not something that has to be taken and processed to turn into something that's highly valuable. It is valuable, and it can be used the way it is. So if you had a vineyard and the vines were growing $100 bottles of wine, we'd have a problem with crime around vineyards. It's just not the same. Marijuana is not tomatoes. It's not wine grapes. It's different and has to be treated differently. Our homicide rate has doubled already, more than doubled. We get about 1 or 2 homicides a year that we have to deal with at the DA's office. We just had a triple homicide. And I can't comment on the case because it is pending in court, but there should be no question in anybody's mind from what's been in the press and what's been said in open court that this did involve marijuana. And we've got 3 murder victims. Okay, so I am very concerned about the crime that occurs around marijuana because of what it is. Something I heard in public comments at one point was that a lot of the suppliers are concerned and they don't want to call law enforcement because they're underground basically, and they're free to call law enforcement. And I'm not sure what that means down the road, but it concerns me that there is crime out there that we're not aware of. So if it turns out that that's what's happening, and they're suffering crime and they're not coming forward with it, that's a whole other issue, and that is a large concern for me. We also have a marijuana robbery, that's the 211, pending with our office. Cartel is here. We don't want to necessarily admit it, but cartel growers are here and causes problems. Opening up to a larger commercial enterprise, I think that's only going to exacerbate that. We have cartels operations that sneak onto BLM land. They sneak onto ranchers' lands. Ranchers don't know about it. They pollute, they are armed, and I believe the Sheriff's Office is going to talk a little bit more about that. So I won't go too much into that, but obviously when there is crime occurring and it affects the Sheriff's Office, eventually it comes up to my office. We also have an issue with diverted supply. Diverted supply not going to a non-medical market. We just had a group of high schoolers have some edibles at school and they got sick. So, it's not that, I'm not saying it was local marijuana that made it in there, but the reality is that medical marijuana does get diverted. It goes into other sources, and we just had a bunch of kids get sick at one of the schools for marijuana. So I think, you jumped ahead. Calaveras County is small enough that anecdotal evidence and personal stories are important, and they're important to policymakers, and they should be. And through the different study sessions, you've heard different stories about the industry, individuals, being good neighbors, and donating to great causes. I agree with that. I know some of the people who have helped out great causes. But I've also heard some other stories on the flip side. During the Butte fire, there were truckloads of marijuana going out of Mountain Ranch. Truckloads of marijuana, not stopping to help save structures, not helping to truck animals out, but going in and saving their marijuana. We've also heard, and again, it's obviously anecdotal evidence, but you've taken that in other settings, of landlords evicting businesses in preparation for a bigger business to come in. So when you consider the anecdotal evidence and the personal stories, I urge you to consider them on the other side as well. Next slide, please. So I think the big question is, what can Calaveras afford? We have to balance the cost of responsible growth and smart growth with a realistic tax gain. We keep hearing about the specter of how much tax money it's going to bring in. Well, I don't know what that amount is, and I don't know what that's going to support, but any tax money is going to be down the road, I would say. So on the spectrum of things, you've got, on the one side, banning it all. Okay, on the other side, you've got big marijuana. So you have to decide, what do you want the county to look like? And I don't think that anybody's really talking about banning everything. We're all very sensitive to patients who need marijuana. That's been a law for many, many, many years, and we've been dealing with that for many, many, many years. But on the other side is big marijuana. Is that what you want for the county? Go ahead. So on the one end, we have patients and primary caregivers. I believe I've discussed this with the Sheriff's Office, and what we think is reasonable right now and what's manageable for us in law enforcement is a 12-plant maximum for 2 patients, for a total of 24 plants. And certainly you can move up the spectrum, keep going up the spectrum, to the larger suppliers, the 5,000 square foot, not acre, up to the 10,000 square foot, up to the 22,000 square foot, inviting a dispensary. But you have to think about the impacts to the county. As a budget-conscious department head, I'm very concerned about what Calaveras County can afford right now. Code compliance can't keep up with what they're doing, and it's no disrespect to code compliance. They can't keep up with what they're doing right now. The planning department, I keep hearing the burdens that are going to be on the planning department. I don't know what Peter's staffing is like, but I don't imagine that they can really handle what they would be tasked with. And I do have a concern about the changing of the outdoor type 2 and 2B and outdoor 3 and 3B zoning. What I heard at one of the study sessions was that requiring a CUP was what they originally desired because they felt that was appropriate, but they can't possibly do it. They can't possibly do it with their current staffing. So the options are to reduce the requirements and require just a P, which I can't remember what it is, but I know it's a lot lower, require just a P, or to give them more staffing to do it right. So I think as for public safety and for the service of all of the public, you want to do it right. You have to do it right, and you got to do it responsibly. Well, that means he needs more people, okay? And I certainly don't want you to take that out of my budget, but he needs more people in order to get this done right. Code compliance needs more people to get it done right. The sheriff's office will talk about their own impacts, but they absolutely are going to need more people to get this done right. Environmental health, other departments, I'm not sure what other departments are going to be involved and what is going to flow from all of this. I just heard the Ag Commissioner talk about what they would be taking on. So, next, please. And certainly for my office, we are already completely overwhelmed with the work we have. These last 3 homicides and marijuana-related homicides have completely overburdened us. I don't know what's going to happen if we have another one. So I'm very concerned about the level of crime and what could happen. And genuinely, I have a question: how much taxes? What's the bottom line dollar? And when? It's one thing to say we want to move towards big marijuana. We want to become the marijuana county. But how are you going to get there? And what's going to happen in the meantime? And can we afford that? I don't think we can. We don't have the infrastructure. We're still in a drought. So I think we are far down on the spectrum, but I would urge you to look at it this way. And so as further you move up and as further you move away just from the reasonable, compassionate support that patients deserve to big marijuana, you're ticking, and it's dollar signs. So what can you afford, and where do you fall along this spectrum? Sorry, Peter, I wasn't quite done. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about one of the aspects of the ordinance and a question that was brought up last time about background checks. We do think they are important to have the background checks for the primary caregivers. And we're not talking about the Bonnie Newmans. We all know Bonnie. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the people who hide behind the law. We're talking about how it's been for years with law enforcement going out, and they've got some cartel growers sitting there with 99 plants for 100 people, and they're saying they got all those little slips of paper that say I'm a primary caregiver. That's what we're talking about. The background checks are very important. We don't want people abusing the law and taking advantage of the system. When we talk about the number of plants and what's reasonable, we're not talking about what people usually think of when they think of someone who needs medical marijuana. We're not talking about, and what law enforcement, we don't typically see the cancer patient or the glaucoma patient who really, really needs it. Over the years, when someone was cited for marijuana and we found out it was a medical need, I've dismissed cases. We've dismissed cases way back 17 years ago when I worked narcotics with then Deputy Ballard. He worked very closely with medical marijuana patients. This is not a new concept for us. We've been dealing with this for years and years and years. And we have a history of being compassionate and for people who are doing it and trying to do it the correct way. Deputy Ballard used to have patients turn in their excess. They'd walk it into the sheriff's department. This is what I needed. This is all I needed. Here, take it. I don't want it. I don't want anything to go wrong with it. And actually personally turn it in, correct? So this is not a new concept, and we are not trying to get into a debate about whether or not medical marijuana is a good thing or not. But I can tell you what we typically see is 18-year-olds who have a medical card because they can't sleep, or they have unspecified back pain. I think one of my favorites is a car full of 20-year-old snowboarders. They were going up to go snowboarding. They had marijuana. Well, they needed the marijuana because they had some back pain. That's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about the people who take advantage of the law and try to subvert the process. I don't think there's any doubt, there shouldn't be any debate that the cost of the county will increase. It's a unique crop that has unavoidable issues, And the answer being, well, we can't afford to do it right, so we're just not going to do it. We aren't going to inspect. We aren't going to permit vigorously. We aren't going to consider the health of the county. We're not going to consider the waterways. We're going to defer it to the state. That is not a reasonable or responsible answer. The answer is that we need to have the infrastructure to do it. The infrastructure costs money, and I don't know where that money is going to come from. Okay, and those are my comments. Did I talk too fast?
Thank you.
No. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I'm glad you did a good job of keeping it down there, Barb.
Okay.
So, thank you for the presentation. I think there's some built-in assumptions there. The one assumption, I think that we're heading into a different time when that marijuana will become, is becoming much more legal. So those snowboarders trying to subvert the law, I mean, that's just going to be a recreational use then, and it's just we're in a transition point.
Talk in your mic there, Chris.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, but I just wanted to ask you about the distribution center. In my mind, and I looked through here, I didn't see a size on that. I'm not thinking it's going to be a mega super sized thing. I mean, it could be, right? But it also could be a very small sized thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be a Highway 5 corridor size. It could be a Highway 49 corridor size, I think. I mean, don't applause there. So I mean...
sorry, Chris. Do you remember about the clapping thing? Right, thank you.
So I just wanted to know, I mean, did I miss something in there that specifically says it's going to be, 10,000 square feet or 50,000 square feet distribution center? I mean, I'm envisioning something much smaller that could fit into the scale of Calaveras.
Well, I don't think that it has to be of a certain size, but I do know that many of our neighboring counties have bans in place. So I would be concerned that if this was the only place to have a distribution center, it could change the face of our county. I know that that was addressed in the zoning table for this. C2 we're going to require a CUP and M1, M2, M4. So, but it is. I think it's important to remember that it's a commercial system. It's a brand new commercial system, and if you have everything coming in, all the transportation, the licensed transportation has to come in and go out and come in and go out. You still have to have the infrastructure for it.
Right, but that's something that we'd want to look at. If we were concerned about it being too large, we could cap the size of that within the zoning, so it would eliminate that problem. Correct?
I would think so, but I would defer to county council and the planning director on those sorts of limitations.
Certainly, the board would have the ability to put size limitations on building sizes for distribution centers. That is something that the board has discretion in.
Okay.
As long as they also meet all of the other requirements of the zoning and everything else, yes.
And I did want to say that, suppliers who come here to the Board of Supervisors, many of them, they're part of the community, part of the greater community. They're coming here because they care, and they may very well be good neighbors and good people who are committed to our community. And they may very well intend that all the marijuana they grow are going to patients in need. I have no question in my mind that a lot of the people who come before you are taking the time because they care about it, they're passionate about it, it's a personal issue for them. I get it. But the reality is that not all suppliers are these good neighbors who care at all about Calaveras County. All they want to do is line their pockets. And so we have to, when we're thinking about bringing in a brand new industry, we have to look at the big picture. I'm sure you've all been approached. I'm sure you've sat through, the hours of the personal gut-wrenching stories that some of the people have told you. But you have to look at it all. You have to look at the whole landscape, which is why I did spend a few minutes putting up really what the whole market looks like, because I think that's important. I think it's the important perspective to have. It's not just the mom and pop third generation suppliers. It's not. Okay, thank you.
Chair, I have a question of District Attorney Yook. Barbara, violation of the ordinance, should we decide to enact one, what is the district attorney's office intention for the procedure of prosecuting those violations? Those are going to be misdemeanors, is that correct?
That's how it's written. It's written that they're misdemeanors with a maximum $500 fine and 6 months in jail. The reality is that really no one goes to jail anymore for misdemeanors. So, and the other issue is that the ordinance itself is quite robust, and it deals with a lot of very particular issues. I think County Council did a great job combing through the weeds. I don't mean that as a pun, but going through all of the particular steps and all of the different issues that can come up. But when I look at a case, I look at always every single case. Is there a crime? Can I prove it? And should I prove it? If you're talking about an 8-foot fence. Well, okay, the fence is an 8 foot. Okay, it's a crime under the ordinance, and I can prove it. But can I prove it to a jury? And then should I prove it? So we're going to be looking at each of them individually, but it is going to be labor intensive. I personally preferred more of a stacked procedure, starting off with infractions, and so by the time it does rise to a misdemeanor level, then it's a little more impactful for a jury. You guys have seen, you've seen the public response. Frankly, it would be very tough to get a jury in Calaveras County to convict somebody of a misdemeanor for not having the right size fence or the wrong size light, just that one issue. So I'm not standing here giving anybody a free pass, but, the reality is when we charge a case, we have to be able to prove it to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, a jury of 12. So, like I said, I was hoping more for maybe a stacked level of crimes, maybe that start off with infractions, and after your third one, then it's a misdemeanor, because then a jury might be a little more compelled to convict because the person's been given chance after chance after chance, and they just don't care anymore. And so now we need to step it up. The other thing is that when you're talking about commercial enterprise, you're talking about money, and that's where the punishment is in the money. So,
who actually determines the fine structure on, say, your larger commercial, if we placed a ordinance in place? Who would determine that fine structure?
Well, because
or the penalty structure.
Go ahead.
The government code sets out the limits of how much a fine can be. But the way that we have it structured, I believe it scales up based on the government code on how many times there's been a violation. And how many, and what is considered violation. So, for instance, I believe that we have it written in the proposed draft that, again, is not in front of the board to act on today, but for any day. Each day is a separate and distinct violation. So if it is a $100 violation, then it could, the second one I think is up to $500. So each day after it reaches the $500 mark would be an additional violation. It would be $500 each day, so it would compound. And that is based on the government code. But it would be set up in the ordinance that the board would ultimately put into place.
Do you have any estimation of what kind of workload would be actually placed on our court system should those infractions turn to misdemeanors, turn to whatever? How is that going to impact our court system here?
That's an interesting question. Unless unless code compliance and the sheriff's office and planning has the ability and has the staffing to go out and develop the cases, it's not going to have much of an effect because we won't be going through the doors. So, or if the BMMR decides to come in and do a sweep or go and knock on doors and find a bunch of violations, then we will come in Monday morning and have a bunch of cases dumped on us. So when the ABC does that, we have about, depending on the size of the operation, 12, 20. It depends. It depends. But I don't know what the structure is going to be of the BMMR. I don't know how active they're going to be. I don't know the funding level. I don't know how much they're going to focus on Calaveras County. I really don't know. Which it brings me back to the point that if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. That means not relying on the outside state agency to come in and make sure everybody is safe, make sure that it's being done appropriately, make sure that the cartels are staying out, and make sure that the marijuana is not being diverted to the non-medical market. And who's going to do that? It's got to be local people doing it. It's got to be code. It's got to be planning. It's got to be the sheriff's office, which means, you got to have the additional staffing. And I don't know where that money's going to come from.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to save public comments till after the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
So next we would have the sheriff's office. They have a presentation they would like to make, so we need a brief moment to allow for them to set up.
Sorry, Captain Macedo asked me to speak briefly to the board while they're setting up their presentation.
Let's hold it down, please.
So,
just to let you know, the fans on this day are not working.
So, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I guess it's good afternoon now. My name is Lieutenant Lewis. I'm the commander of the San Andreas CHP office, and we fully understand laws are laws. We enforce the laws. We understand there's federal laws, state laws, and county laws that we have to enforce. One of our concerns is the transportation or illegal transportation of marijuana on the highways, as well as those who are driving under the influence of marijuana. So what I did, real briefly, is I brought one of my resident experts, a drug recognition evaluator expert, who's very good at what he does, one of the best I have in the office, and I want him to address you real briefly on our concerns regarding driving under the influence of marijuana. John Fernandez.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Officer John Fernandez from the CHP San Andreas. Like Commander said, he asked me to come and talk to you all about the effects that marijuana can have on your driving. First off, when we do DUI enforcement, we do standard field sobriety tests. It tests divided attention tasks, which affects you. That's how you drive. Your attention is divided. You have to look for hazards. You have to operate your vehicle. All kinds of substances will impair your ability to do that, including alcohol, marijuana, all kinds of different pills. When we're doing these field sobriety tests, again, we're looking for impairment. Currently, there's no way for us to, other than those tests, to test for marijuana content in your, like a roadside test. There's no roadside test for marijuana impairment. We do those performance-based tests, and then from there it goes to a drug recognition expert, which is what I do. We go and look at a little more in depth. Currently in California, there is no presumptive limit for saying that you are or are not impaired, like there is for alcohol. Typically with marijuana specifically, the duration of the effects can be anywhere from 30 minutes all the way out to 5 hours, depending on the THC content, depending on the user, how often they use. If they're a frequent user, it's obviously not going to affect them as long. So their ability to drive can be affected for many hours afterwards, after they stop feeling the effects. A few of the things that we do see on the psychological side and the physical side can be disorientation, altered space and time perception. Okay, so braking distances, reacting to something like a deer on the road, things like that can be delayed. We're looking also at lack of concentration, drowsiness, again, coordination, problem solving. All these things come into effect when your body's being affected by that. And then I just have a quick list of things here from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA. They've done numerous tests on this, on alcohol as well. And their effects on driving have been shown to impair performance in simulated tasks as well as on open and closed course. They've seen that it's affected driving ability for at least 3 hours, decreased car handling performance, increased reaction to reaction times, time and distance estimation, like I said before. And again, motor coordination is going to be affected as well. Okay, and that's for us. Again, we deal with DUI enforcement, and that's our biggest concern. Regardless of the rest of it, it's your impaired ability to drive.
Officer Fernandez, is there a breathalyzer type instrument that you're using yet?
Currently, no. I know throughout the country. They're being tested, but we are not using one yet.
Thank you.
Any questions?
One more question, Officer Fernandez. When you do make an arrest for driving under the influence, is there any chemical test that you use to detect the presence of THC or marijuana? Urine test, blood test, or whatever?
Yes, sir. Currently, it's blood. So what we do is we make the arrest based on the standard tests. The person consents to the blood draw. We take blood and it's sent off to the lab for examination. We'll get a result back with a THC level. Again, there's no presumptive limit like a 0.08 would be for alcohol. So it's all subjective based on the way they perform in the test, their driving, and the way that they perform in the subsequent test that we do as a DRE.
One quick question. In the crashes or collisions that we experience, I don't expect you to be exact on this, in Calaveras County over the last 5 years, can you tell us what estimated percentage involves alcohol or alcohol and drugs, or a combination of both?
I can't give you a percentage or an exact number. I can tell you personally that I've been on a good number of collisions that involve what we call polydrug use. So typically a marijuana or any other drug mixed with alcohol kind of as a combo. So we do see a lot of that. Alcohol, in addition to those drugs, has an additive effect, which it tends to increase those other, the impairment. So, but I'd have to research the numbers for you to give you an exact percentage.
I guess good answer would be you recognize the presence of that particular
Definitely.
scenario in our crashes.
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Jim Macedo, Sheriff's Office. I'm a captain with the Sheriff's Office. Peter, are you able to move through? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go through a short PowerPoint here, and then I have some separate notes. I brought with me some staff today that I may refer to if specific questions come up. Although I hate talking about myself, I do want to just talk about a couple of things so the board understands where I come from. I've been with the Sheriff's Office 22 years. I spent 4 of those years in the Narcotics Enforcement Unit. During that time, I specifically investigated cases of large-scale marijuana cultivation and trafficking. Although I spent the bulk of that time working what we refer to as white dope, I also assisted the marijuana team quite often because of the size of our team. I've testified as a court-certified expert on marijuana. I also have a little bit of a biology background in college, so I've taken botany. I know a little bit about plants. I'm far from an expert, but I just wanted to give the board a little context before I move on that I don't come up here without any experience on the topic. I am going to talk about 2 specific categories as it relates to the ordinance. I'm not here to argue today about the war on drugs or the benefits of marijuana or necessarily the issue of marijuana itself. I'm going to try and stick topically to the ordinance and the impacts on the county so you all have a better awareness of what's going on in the county and to give you probably an unbiased and unslanted version of what's actually occurring. With respect to the ordinance decision, I'm looking at that, and you guys have a specific decision to make on the ordinance, and how you make that decision will directly impact the Sheriff's Office. So there's going to be some related impacts on the Sheriff's Office depending upon how you adopt this ordinance and what you include in it. Next slide, please. So some of the decisions you have involve allowing indoor or outdoor cultivation, how many plants, the size of the cultivation area, whether you allow local growers or transient growers, and I do want to talk about transient growers specifically today. You also have land use issues and the size of the property where the cultivation may occur. That's also going to affect our calls for service, and it's going to impact our office.
And also, I want to talk about hash labs or honey oil labs because I think there's some confusion. And if I use phrases or terms such as hash or honey oil and somebody's not familiar with it, please speak up. Next slide. In addition, I want to talk about garbage. I know some of you have been invited to marijuana cultivation sites in the county. Some of you were specifically invited there to show you how clean and pristine and well manicured those marijuana cultivation sites are. And don't think for a moment that those sites were not prepared before you got there. They were prepared to show you a clean site. The other side of the story is this photo. It's from Calaveras County. And you can see the large amount of garbage that was left there. Unfortunately, I do not have enough photos or slides to show you the miles upon miles of drip tubing that's left all over the county. There is no fund in the sheriff's office budget to clean that up. In addition, I don't have great photos of the pesticides or pollutions that are being used in some of these grows that are also working their way into the water system. Some of those water systems are attached to wells that are used for residential use. Next slide. I apologize for those of you in the back. This is a Google Earth area overview, and you can look and see it's a large-scale marijuana grow interspersed in between the trees. And the caption of this slide that was sent to me is, "This is what our county looks like from the air." I would encourage all of you to take a look at what the county looks like from the air, specifically in Supervisor Wright's district. In the area of Murphy's, there's a considerable amount of marijuana growing, and while it's very difficult, especially pre-fire, to see that marijuana growing from the road, you can see what it looks like from the air, and you can see just the type of damage that's been done as it relates to some of the terracing or cutting of the brush or diverting or altering streams in order to obtain water. I mentioned hash labs utilizing butane. I just want to make sure we're unequivocally clear. You cannot vote that into part of your ordinance. That is a crime, okay? That is a crime. It is a crime, okay? You cannot vote hash or honey oil labs into your ordinance. You cannot approve that today, okay? That's still manufacturing of a controlled substance, okay? Next slide. Okay, violence and robberies. I'm going to bring up Sergeant Rochelle Whiting just to briefly talk to you about those so you can kind of have a firsthand experience on what's occurred just in 2015.
Thank you, sir. He's taller than I am. Sergeant Rochelle Whiting with the Sheriff's Office. Not only do I oversee the Narcotics Division, but I have investigations as well, so we handle both narcotics and crimes. In 2015, the Sheriff's Office investigated 6 bodies that died as a result of a homicide. 4 of those bodies had a direct correlation to a marijuana cultivation site. We also had 8 attempted murders, 34 assault with a deadly weapons, and 2 home invasion robberies. The reason that we're telling you this, of course, is because it was asked of us in the December meeting, and we want to point out the fact that, yes, there has been a significant increase of violent crimes in Calaveras County. Excuse me. Some of those attempted murders, the home invasions, they did involve drugs, some of them with marijuana. One of the home invasions involved a property that had a medical marijuana cultivation site. It did have a residence, but all of the residents inside were just living there in order to process the weed. 3 masked armed subjects came onto the property just for the purpose of stealing the marijuana. When they were met with resistance, one of them was shot through the chest. The only reason it's not a homicide statistic is because he's lucky. You know, we had that happen in our county last year. Last year, there was a large-scale operation involving 3 different county SWAT teams that were required to deal with the marijuana cultivation site, where there were known gang members that were wanted for murder and wanted for numerous drive-bys in the city of Stockton. They were up hiding in our county at a site and cultivating marijuana. At another property, the Sheriff's Office seized about 1,900 growing marijuana plants and arrested 3 subjects. These weren't our local growers. 2 of these subjects were Jamaican nationals that came from the Bay Area up to Calaveras County, and they were in our country on a visa just so they could grow marijuana. During harvest time last fall, the Sheriff's Office got a lot of calls about shots fired. And a lot of time, and we get a lot of reports, some of it's reported, as Ms. Yuk pointed out, a lot of it isn't reported. And we're being told that a lot of those calls are just the growers firing off warning shots, trying to keep people off their property that were coming on to steal the marijuana. And for every call that we get, we probably have another 3 that are not reported. I've heard stories of home invasion robberies that happened in our county where the suspects were wearing sheriff raid vests and zip-tied victims and stole their medical marijuana, but none of this was ever reported to the sheriff's office for fear that their growing was illegal as well. We've also been told that, as the captain pointed out, Calaveras County has become so abundant and growing. We have criminals looking on Google Earth. They're finding grows, and then you hit maps, Google Maps, go straight to the property, and now they can easily find grows in our county because they've gotten so large. So for that reason, of course, we ask that you do uphold and not reduce the security requirements if this ordinance does pass. And again, we're not trying to use this as a scare tactic. Supervisor Oliveira, you had asked us for some crime stats in relation to marijuana, which is why we're bringing it to you today. But the fact of the matter is that this trade does attract crime, so we feel it's necessary to bring it up, to point it out. We're not trying to sway you one way or the other. We're just presenting some of the things that the sheriff's office has had to deal with in the past year in relation to marijuana. So the slide that's up there, in the beginning, we started saying when medical marijuana came, we saw the 12-plant recommendation, and then it went to 50, and then it went to 99, and now we're seeing unlimited recommendations, which puts the burden with a lack of local regulation. It puts it on law enforcement officers to try and determine and decide what amount, what count meets a patient's medical needs. The standard or kind of average around right now in our county is a 99-plant grow per patient. So if you look at that plant right there, yes, it is a large, marijuana plant. But on average, one plant can yield anywhere from 1 to 4 pounds. So we were just saying one plant yielding at least 2 pounds. Right now, the average cost of marijuana per pound is anywhere from $800 to $1,200. So we estimate it on the low end. So we're looking at one plant, 2 pounds, $800. You can keep up, but $1,600 per plant times 99 plants is $158,400. Last year, we talked to many growers because of the warmer climate. They were getting 2 harvests in a year, so now you're looking at about $300,000 profit that is completely off the books they're getting in our county. We go to the next slide, please. And we'd just like to point out, too, the Type 3 permit that is proposed, the 22,000 square feet. If we estimated maybe one plant took up a 4-foot by 4-foot section, 16 square feet, you're looking at 1,375 plants times the 2 pounds, you're looking at one harvest, $2.2 million. So when people talk about marijuana and the benefits of our county for taxes and things like that, how is the taxing going to happen for the $2.2 million that it will be going to the suppliers? Something to think about as far as the infrastructure in place.
Peter, would you mind jumping back 2 slides for me, please? One more, please. So I just want to go back to that slide for a moment because that looks real light on paper when you look at that. What you don't see are the hundreds of hours of staff time in cleaning up all of those messes and the financial impact of those investigations, the storage of evidence, the detective's time, the follow-up on interviews. When you have a homicide or a violent crime, most people think when the suspect's in jail or when you've cleared the scene, it's over, that your work output and your monetary output from a budget standpoint are over. Those cases go on for years until they go to trial. And there's a constant staff requirement all the way through testimony and trial. So my point for all of you is that's not anecdotal. That's not somebody telling you that your economy is going to get better. I'm telling you that's what happened. And what I didn't properly do was correlate the costs for each one of those cases because, quite frankly, I didn't have the time or staff to do it. But again, the 2 topics that I want to talk to you about are the ordinance itself and then the impacts on the office, depending on what you approve. If you could jump forward, please, Peter. Thank you. When it comes to compliance, who's going to check and make sure everybody's compliant? Now, you could choose to select an agency other than the sheriff's office to go do compliance checks. And then my question to you would be, when that other agency is concerned for their safety, who are they going to ask to go with them? And the answer to that is they're going to ask either the police department or the sheriff's office. If there's a violation that occurs and the county staff is concerned or the people there make them nervous, who are they going to ask? They're going to ask law enforcement to accompany them. Same thing when it's actually time to take enforcement. Same thing when it's actually time to collect evidence. And I should have put dollar bill signs next to all those question marks, because what happens is every one of those requires a cost. And I know this board is cost conscious and they have budgetary concerns. I know that because I've asked you for staff recently and I've been told no because you have budget concerns. The impacts to this ordinance are going to continue on and on for a while until they get balanced out. And they are expensive. They're expensive now, and they stand to get more expensive as time moves on. I also want to just address one other issue with environmental concerns, and I know you have, or at least you did have, Jason from Environmental Health. When you get long-term significant dumps, the sheriff's office is not capable of cleaning those up. You're going to have to come in with a hazardous materials cleanup crew to clean up things such as butane that's been poured in the ground for years upon end, or pesticides that come out of Mexico or herbicides that come out of another country that are being used. We don't have the capability to clean that up in the county, and again, it leads to a great expense. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to spend some time on this slide specifically about these 6 groups. There essentially are 6 groups or types of people involved in marijuana in Calaveras. You have the small grower and user that are cultivating for personal use, some of which is medical use, people that are kind of trying to comply with the law and they're keeping it very much to themselves. And sometimes they have an impact on law enforcement, not generally. Sometimes their grow bothers their neighbor for whatever reason, or somebody calls in because they just have an opposition to it, and the sheriff's office has to respond out and deal with it. Whether it's a patrol officer or investigations, kind of depends on the background and what's going on and what's being reported. The second group you have is, the personal cultivator who really is just growing for themselves, for their own use. They're keeping it very tight and kind of concealed, and they really don't have a big impact on our office. The third type is the marijuana cultivator who grows and sells to others, some of which, or a lot of which, are involved in collectives or dispensaries or other folks. And again, those folks, we do get calls about them because, again, the odor's bothering their neighbor or something. There's some concern or something happens. Maybe they're the victim of a theft or what have you. But that third group of people does have a little more of an impact on us because, generally speaking, word gets out as to what they're doing. But let's talk a lot about number 4. Number 4, and I highlighted that in red on purpose. These are the marijuana cultivators who claim, and excuse my poor spelling or grammar there, who claim to be growing or selling to just medicinal users, but in reality they're criminal organizations that are hiding under the guise of existing laws and ordinances. And this is a huge problem in our county. I addressed this with some of you privately, and I also addressed it with some of you during the development of this ordinance. You have organized crime members that are using existing laws, and they are posting random, fictitious, or people that we will never be able to track down inside their marijuana grows as those are their patients. Okay? And there was one this year where I attempted to grab one of the board members to take them up there to show it. I think there were 6 or 8 postings of Hispanic or Asian males and females from Southern California. Now, these postings just had a picture and a recommendation. No address, no phone number, absolutely no way for us to verify that that was a medicinal grow. However, there was an indicator. There was a Mexican male with an Uzi machine gun inside the grow guarding him. And that Mexican male also happened to have a bunch of drug patron saint memorabilia inside the grow. But again, this is all medicinal on its face. Now, as a sheriff's office and as a manager, when we send people out to those types of grows, we don't want to send a big tactical unit into a person who is listed under, section number 2, a small grower. We don't need necessarily armored vehicles and heavy weaponry to go talk to those folks. Okay? Number 4 is a different situation. The problem is it comes to us under, it's posted, it's a medicinal grow. What happens when we get there? We can't get saddled up and redressed. It places staff in danger. It causes us the inappropriate approach. And quite frankly, I'm not comfortable sending my staff over and over again into these reported or alleged medical marijuana grows that are nothing but organized crime that are now using the weak laws and ordinances of this state to hide behind in order to continue their criminal enterprise. I have a huge problem with that. I want to talk about 5. There was some light mention of cartels and gangs. They are here. There's Mexican drug trafficking organizations here. There's Asian drug trafficking organizations here. These folks, and I'm going to talk about really the cartels first, they are violent individuals. They are close to another country, and they are not going to be hesitant to use weapons, against law enforcement or civilian personnel because they're about a 6 to 7 hour car ride from another country where it's very hard to find them. They've been operating here for a long time. Is this ordinance going to affect them? No, but what we have seen, and again, this is not anecdotal, we have seen them start to shrink the size of their grows and post their grows and try to act as though they're medicinal marijuana growers in hopes that we will not either approach them or respond to them in the same manner. And those gangs are here. It's not questionable. We're dealing with them every year. Sergeant Whiting mentioned gangs. There was a gang from Stockton that was involved in a bunch of homicides. They were growing marijuana, again, up in this county in a very quiet place in the western portion of this county. They had assault rifles. They were responsible for numerous shootings and homicides. It was a large-scale search warrant. I can't recall. There was probably 10 to 20 locations we hit simultaneously, not just in Calaveras County. But those folks were here, and they were operating in our county. And again, they were trying to utilize the guise of medicinal marijuana to hide their criminal enterprise. Lastly, number 6, and this is a group that's not talked about very frequently. You have robbery crews in this county, and robbery crews are specifically people who have no desire to grow marijuana, no desire to get involved in the drug business other than to steal the proceeds and the drugs. They have been here for a very long time. I'm not talking about the little punk transient kids that come up here to snatch a bunch of marijuana and run back home. I'm talking about guys who gear themselves up, who pre-plan. They are hardened criminals that have been in and out of prison their whole life, and this is what they do. And I will tell you a quick quote from one of them. He told me a long time ago, hey, you have your job, and I have mine. This is what I do. I rip off dope dealers. He's still here today. He goes in and out of federal and state prison. He hooks back up with his buddies, and they commit robberies. These are not, again, small punk kids who are running around doing a quick snatch and run. These are folks that are much more organized. Next slide. Impacts. Okay. It is estimated that approximately 43% of California cities and counties have seen a ban or are awaiting one. Personal cultivation in both Amador and Tuolumne County, as I understand it, is now set at 12 and 24 plants, depending on the two caregiver or two patient recommendation. Stanislaus, San Joaquin, Alpine, and Amador have all banned commercial, and I want to emphasize commercial cultivation. They've done that for a reason. I think that's why you're seeing an influx of growers in this county, not just because of the climate and the elevation and the laws. You're seeing pressure being caused by outside counties banning it, and folks are coming here because there is an appearance, whether it's genuine or perceived, that this is a pro-marijuana or a county that is in support of marijuana cultivation. I see that as a problem, folks. I heard a gentleman come speak before you a couple of weeks ago that said he moved here specifically to grow marijuana. I'm sorry, but I think if you want to move to this county, move here to conduct a legitimate business that doesn't create crime. Next slide. I'm going to go over some notes real quick, and then I want to conclude with a quick story. I want to talk about fines, because it was mentioned. District Attorney Yook mentioned fines and how she was in support of it starting out as infractions. I'm not in support of that. I believe the fine should be a misdemeanor immediately with the heaviest fine possible as governed by state law. The reason I say that is many, and I'm not going to say many, not all, but many members of this culture do not take hints or infractions lightly. It just took us approximately, I believe, 2 years to shut down a marijuana dispensary that was operating outside of zoning laws in the county. And even after they were warned and posted and noticed, they continued to operate. Unfortunately, this culture does not take well to polite warnings or court threats or letters from attorneys. It generally takes a lot more than that. In addition, the amount of money, when you look at the amount of money that Sergeant Whiting spoke about that can be generated from cultivating marijuana, there's not a lot of emphasis or concern about paying out small fines, specifically misdemeanor fines. So I want to tell you a story about an anonymous resident. Unfortunately, he is anonymous. He came to the sheriff's office a couple of weeks ago, and he asked to sit down and talk with me about what's going on in his neighborhood. This gentleman has a family. He's lived in the county for 16 years. He owns and operates a legitimate business. He was a victim of the fire, and as he attempts to rebuild, he told me that he has 3 new neighbors. All 3 neighbors surround him entirely, and he informed me that all 3 neighbors have approached him and told him that they intend to grow marijuana. One of which, the group of neighbors he replied, was from out of state. The other 2 were, one was local and had been there for a while, the other moved from another part of the county. He had concerns over well water and having 3 growers in his neighborhood. He said that at the time he's been in this county, he's got a business license, he's followed every law that's been asked of him. And he was at his wit's end because he was concerned about these folks moving around him, being involved in the type of business and culture, and sucking the well water. He was basically at a point where he wanted to give up and move out of the county. I can tell you I've talked to some homicide victims' families over my career. I've talked to a lot of victims, and I genuinely felt bad for this guy. I asked him to come. He said he was concerned and scared for his own safety. That he didn't want to be, have any problems moving forward, considering how far away he lived from law enforcement. But I have to tell you, to a certain extent, it's law enforcement's job to speak for people who are too concerned to speak for themselves. And while, I implored him to come speak before you because I told him how influential he may be before the board, I completely understood his reason for not. And I can tell you that there are probably a lot of other folks in this county who could not be here today because they're working or they have something else going on that don't want marijuana growing in the county. Unfortunately, not all of them can be here. I'm sure you'll hear from a few. I'm sure you're going to hear from the other side heavily. But I would ask you to think about those particular hardworking folks that couldn't take the day off of work or couldn't get here to tell you their side of the story. Your options, and I know you have many, are an outright ban, a plant limit, as the district attorney mentioned, of 12 plants per parcel with no more than 2 patients per property. I want to emphasize local patients. When we met, I got to tell you folks, if you guys are going to go down this road, I really would emphasize local people being allowed to obtain permits. I just don't think this board or this county is ready for an influx of people involved in this type of business and what they bring with them. Yes, they do bring some good things with them, but unfortunately there's also a lot of bad. Limiting the square footage, we talked about that heavily in the ordinance. I have some very big concerns about that law being manipulated. For those of you that were in the marijuana working group from a year ago, I asked for very strict and specific language in the ordinance, again, because this culture has a tendency to try and manipulate language in an ordinance. And when you have square footage, there could be stacking, you could go vertical, I don't know. It takes time for me to understand how people can manipulate certain laws, but believe me, it happens quite frequently. So I would really strongly consider that if you do pass an ordinance allowing marijuana, that your language is very strict and specific. Before I conclude, let me just check and make sure I don't have any other notes or issues that I missed. Peter, would you mind bumping forward once, just making sure I don't have anything else? Thank you. Okay, I believe that concludes my comments. I'll take any questions from the board.
Questions?
Thank you.
Captain, I have a question. Should this board decide to establish a ordinance at the very limits of restriction, how will that affect your existing budget right now with your total manpower, person power, that you have today?
That's very hard for me to predict because I cannot accurately predict what the influx or the increase would be. I don't have any measurable data from past history other than what's occurring now, and that's what we tried to demonstrate up there. We can tell you what's occurred, and we're very aware culturally, so to speak, what changes have occurred in the county as it relates to Calaveras becoming more, attractive to marijuana growers. This may be a bad year in so much as we had the triple homicide, which that is high. It's not uncommon to have homicides relating to the drug business, specifically marijuana. A triple, yeah, it's uncommon. So this may be a bad year, but what I can tell you, and what Sergeant Whiting alluded to, is whether you like marijuana or not, and actually District Attorney Yook did an excellent job, this culture, and it's the drug business and the amount of money associated with it, it does have a significant amount of crime. It's just because of greed and money. That's not to say everybody in the room is greedy or everybody in the room is after money, but what I am telling you is that it's very similar to the culture. And when you guys asked me to come and speak, I actually took a step back and I looked at a couple of other, civic crime problems, such as, allowing a strip club or bringing in a venue to a county that would have a bunch of gangster rap performers come in. Stuff like that, you kind of have an understanding that there's going to be a certain amount of crime associated with that, and drugs are one of them. It's referred to as vice, but unfortunately that's the culture.
How do we, to the best of your knowledge, how are the crime problems being dealt with by our surrounding counties, Amador County, Tuolumne County, those counties that did ban or restricted? Are they seeing an influx of crime in their budgets and law enforcement or public safety being affected?
Well, they have commercial bans, but the grows are still continuing. They're still responding to them. Both counties on either side of us are structured a little different. They have more police departments, with the exception of Tuolumne has one larger police department and a large portion of their population in the middle of the city. Has it gone away since they've banned? Absolutely not. It still continues. But they have different narcotics structures and controlled substance investigative structures than we do, and their staffing issue is not nearly in as bad a situation as ours is right now. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but the problems continue, but maybe not necessarily to the extent we have. I don't know if you guys are aware, but the Tuolumne Sheriff made a comment to his board a few weeks ago referencing what happened in Calaveras in a negative light when he was speaking to his board, specifically as it relates to marijuana. You're welcome.
Captain Macedo, we have brought up in several different hearings that you have not been able to hire all the officers that we've actually budgeted for. Is that still the case?
Yes.
How many positions do we have open now?
I don't know. We have 3 in the academy. I think we're around 6 vacancies on patrol right now, but that's an approximate.
So even if there was a funding source to hire 3 dedicated employees or officers just for this issue, the likelihood of finding those is still not an easy likelihood.
So I think the best way to answer that is it would be a struggle, but we don't put brand new officers, generally speaking, into this type of investigative. We would pull experienced officers out, and then we would need to hire their replacements. We do, as the board knows, and approved 2 recent programs to help offset some of those staffing issues. But yeah, it's taken us a long time to get folks hired and staffed right now for a variety of reasons.